delighted to be here. I've got to say that because you told me I had to. But it's a fine selection of Argyle fans before me. I have a wonderful memory. Tonight I've been talking to several people here tonight, and it's amazing that the things that I can remember. Unfortunately, my hearing is very, very bad, and I won't be able to hear any of the questions you ask me. That's my excuse anyway. If you're not enjoying the evening and you want to boo me, you're wasting your time because I can't hear you. But no, it's great to be here. In fact, at my age, it's great to be anywhere. But my connections with Argyle, well, I started watching Argyle. My father took me to watch games in the 1930s. We used to go be at the Devonport end, and I was here when Argyle played Aston Villa in 1934, and there was 43,000 people here. I mean, that's unbelievable. When we get 10,000, we're thinking we're doing very well now, but 43,000. But you've got to consider the time. Back then there was no television, nothing like that. Football was all the rage, wasn't it? But then, of course, the first game in the 1939-40 season was West Ham, and I was at that match, of course. And we had 2 away games with Millwall and Sheffield Wednesday, and then war was declared. So then there was no football then, right through for the war. I got called up in the army in 26th of October 1944, and I finished up during 2.5 years out in Palestine, Syria and Egypt. And my father used to send me the cuttings, the match reports of Argyle, cutting out of the Herald and the Morning News, and send them out to me. It arrived about a fortnight after, but I used to keep a scrapbook because it was, it was wonderful. But I watched lots of football and played football and refereed some games out in Palestine, and met a number of ex-footballers. People like Tommy Docherty. He was in the Argyle and Sutherland Highlanders. He played in a match that I refereed. And Arthur Rowley, he was the brother of Jack Rowley, who became the Argyle manager. And I met him on several occasions. He was very, very good. He came on with me on the troop ship when we both got demobbed on Christmas Eve 1947, and we were on, I can remember distinctly, we were on the top deck and they were giving out the football results. He played for West Bromwich Albion. He was a part-time player at that time, but they were giving out the results and they go, West Bromwich Albion 2, Plymouth Argyle 5. I remember jumping in the air up there because I'd beaten them, and of course Argyle 5 goals, and it turned out that the Thomas brothers, Dave Thomas and his brother, scored all 5 goals for that match. That was absolutely wonderful. When I got demobbed, I started my own football team with a chap called Rolf Burrows. And we called them Western Mill Spurs. And I ran the football team for a couple of years, and then I became secretary of the P&D League, the local P&D League, and I was there for 17 years as secretary and treasurer. I went to a dinner in Tavistock, a football dinner on a Friday night, and the Saturday morning, 8 o'clock, the phone went, and it was the vice chairman of Plymouth Argyle, Doug Fletcher. And he said to me, I've got a big surprise for you. I must see you this morning. Definitely, it's very urgent. So I said, well, tell me what it's for. And he said, no, I'm not going to tell you. He told me where he lived and he wanted me to come out that morning. So about 10:30, I drove out And I thought, I got an idea. This is his secretary's job. I'd heard rumours that the young secretary at Argyle wasn't very good, and he'd been there just 12 months. And I thought, I bet this is it. And of course, when I got there, that's exactly what it was. 3 hours later, I was still there, and he was still trying to persuade me. And in the end, he said, I'll give you 24 hours. I can't give you any longer. I'll give you 24 hours. I said, well, I've got a wife and 3 children and a big mortgage, and you sack secretaries at Argyle as often as you sack managers. So I don't think I'll be doing it. But I took the wife and children to Goodrington in the afternoon, and I walked up and down that beach, and what shall I do, what shall I do? In the end, I thought, yes, I'm 39, I'll give it a go. So I told him yes, and I wrote my resignation out for the gas board. I worked in the gas board offices, and I took it into Alf Marshall, the general manager, on the Monday morning, and he read it and he said, you must be mad. They sack secretaries as manager? I said, yes, I know they do, but I've made up my mind. He said, don't be silly. And he just tore it up and threw it in his waste paper basket. Well, I thought, well, I've got 2 weeks holiday to come. I had to give a month's notice, but right, so I said, yes, I'll do the job. So the Argyle notified the Football League and the FA the following day that I'd been appointed the secretary. It was all in the papers and everything. And they were constantly on the phone to me while I was at work in the gas board. And one call was, can you come out right away? We transferred a player to Queen's Park Rangers. You're the secretary now, so your name's got to go on the transfer forms. So I pleaded with my boss, can I have time off? So I drove out to Argyle, and this fellow was called Sanderson, I always remember. Queen's Park Rangers. So I shook hands with him, I signed the forms. He drove off to London, I drove back to the gas board. so that was my introduction to that. So little did I know that I was going to carry on all these years, and but I thoroughly enjoyed it, there's no doubt about that. I'd only been in the job for about 12 months, and I got a call from Alan Hardacre, the secretary of the league. He said, I know you haven't been in this job very long, but you've got a big match coming up. He said, we're going to bring the England team to Plymouth. So I said, what for? He said, well, they're going to represent the Football League versus the Irish League. And he gave me the date and everything. So, of course, I rang up the chairman and told him. He was quite excited. Cut a long story short, we had a 40,000 crowd, just under. 8 of the team that won the World Cup played in the match. Bobby Moore was the captain. They turned up with the World Cup, and I had it in the boardroom, but there was a security man there with an Alsatian dog, seeing that nobody was going to pinch it. But I thought to myself then, I thought, I've only been in this ruddy job 12 months and I'm holding the World Cup. I'm glad I took this job. So anyway, that was wonderful, the 12-0, and that following on from that, of course we had an under-21 or under-23 international with Bulgaria, and Ulf Ramsey was, in those days, the England manager also looked after the under-23 team. So of course they came down and played, and in the squad that he selected was an Argyle player, Norman Piper, young lad from North Devon, and he was in the squad. So as we walked down I met the party as they arrived, and as we walked down towards the dressing rooms, he said to me, I think I'll select this Norman Piper. He said he'll have his first cap for the match. He said, "Would you like to tell the press?" So I said, "Oh yes, thank you very much." He said, "Yes, well, I'll leave it to you. You tell the press that he's playing." So of course all the press men, they were all delighted about that in the media, the local media, they were quite delighted about that. And of course Norman played. And we had a bumper crowd. I can't remember what the crowd was exactly. But it was a really good crowd, and everything went exceedingly well. What's after that? Well, of course, as I said, Bobby Moore was there. And incidentally, Alan Hardacre, he said to me, "I know Plymouth very well." He said, "You can't tell me anything about Plymouth." So I said, "Well, you're from Yorkshire, aren't you?" He said, "Yes, but I was here on HMS Newcastle. We were the anti-aircraft cruiser in Plymouth Sound during the Blitz on Plymouth," which amazed me really. But so that was that. Then we had the next big match was the Manchester United versus St Etienne. I got a call from the FA to say, would we be prepared to put on the match, because Manchester United had been ordered to play they'd already played St Etienne in France, and because of the bad behaviour of the Manchester fans, the match had to be played. They ruled that the match had to be played more than 150 miles from Manchester. So it was either Argyle or Aberdeen. And I said, "Oh, we'll take the match, definitely." Straight away. I wasn't going to ask anybody. That was a certainty. So he said, "Can I say you'll take it?" I said, "Oh yes, definitely." So of course I ring the chairman. He's absolutely astonished. But we had a great efforts to put the match on, and there was a lot of criticism locally, because they were afraid. People were afraid that the hooligans from Manchester would come down to Plymouth. But as it happened, I think they filmed the match and showed the match on film at Old Trafford. So not a great number of Manchester fans came down, but we still had 35,000 at the game. Over 200 press and media people turned up. So as Harley and the other press people here will know, and a lot of people who sit and stand know, we haven't got a very big press box, and then I had to accommodate 200 people. So what I did, it caused a bit of trouble really. What I did was gave the whole of the front row and half of the second row in the grandstand. Of course, as you'll appreciate, you season ticket holders, they were quite annoyed to think that I should do such a thing, but we had to look after them. It was a big match. I got a few letters of complaint, but it had to be done. And we put a big marquee up in Hirehome Park to accommodate all the press and the media people there. Manchester United were absolutely delighted with the way we arranged the match. It was at short notice and everything. And a surprise to me, but in the boardroom after the match, the chairman of Manchester United called my name and gave me a presentation. Also they gave a presentation to the head groundsman here. We were the two they singled out, which was very, very good. Then we come to the Santos match. Everybody talks about the Santos match because it was wonderful. Apart from the fact that they tried a bit of crookery there, but with the money. But in actual fact, the demand for tickets was absolutely huge, and people were coming from Birmingham and Bristol, all over the place to the match. There was trains run from Penzance and Exeter. It was tremendous, the demand for tickets, and I had to take on extra staff. We only had 4 in the office, of course, but we had to take on extra staff to deal with it. And I can remember one night, they were all worked till 11 o'clock at night, and I said to Peter Hall, is he here tonight, Peter? No. He was my assistant. I said to Peter, look, there's a sack full there. I'll take it home with me. Will you come home with me? And he said yes. So 11 o'clock at night we drove home, and we were in the front room there dealing with the tickets, and all of a sudden the front doorbell went. I thought, who the hell's that? And I went out, and there's a police car outside, and it was an ex-Argyle player called David Downs. He didn't play in the first team very often, but he came from Scotland, but he actually lodged with my mother, as a lot of Argyle players did do then. And I knew him very well, and he said, I said, what's the matter? He said, well, that's what I'm thinking. He said, I see the light on, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. What, has something happened? I said, yes, we're got a sack load of tickets. He said, I'll give you a hand. He said, I've got an hour's break. So we had a panda car outside my house, and he came in, and he took his cap off, and he was lending us a hand. Not only did he do that, when we sorted all the mail out, we had all the envelopes, and David then drove Peter, who lived at Lisson Grove, he drove Peter down to Pennycombe Quick post office and passed in all the letters. That was santastic. That's the kind of thing it was. But then, of course, we had the Santos people demanding another 2,500, which doesn't sound very much now, does it? But that was a lot of money. They demanded before they wouldn't change. The players wouldn't change until we agreed to give them another 2,500. After the match, we had a lovely reception in the Holiday Inn. Our players mixed with our players very well, and so on. And Robert Daniel said to me, I've got the money here, he said, in cellophane packets. He said, I've got a room upstairs in the Holiday Inn. You come with me, and their representative, their president, I think he was, he'll come up. So we all went into this room, and Robert said to him, you have twisted us tonight. It's disgusting, your treatment. We will report you to the Football Association, and you will never play football in this country again. And he shrugged his shoulders and he said, plenty more countries. And as I dropped the cellophane packets on, he scooped them into his bag, never said good night, and walked out. About 3 or 4 years after that, I got another call from the FA, and they said, Mr. Little, we've got your money. And I said, money? What money? Didn't have a clue. He said, we've got the money from Santos. I said, oh, how did you manage that? He said, well, they applied to FIFA to play Ajax. We used to call it Ajax, didn't we? The Ajax. They wanted to play Ajax in a match in Holland, and FIFA said they couldn't do so until they paid up the money they owed Plymouth Argyle. So that's how we got the money back. So that was a happy ending in the end there. But it was great because I had to meet, I've got a photograph of it, I had to meet Pele and the Santos team at Plymouth Station, and there must have been, it seemed like 1,000 people there. They all got to hear when the train was coming in, and the North Road station was absolutely packed. And I went back to the hotel with the Brazilian agent, and saw them there, and that was wonderful. Then the next game, if you like, I don't know if it's necessarily in order, but you probably have heard about we played Manchester City in the Cup, in the League Cup, and there was a power problem in those days. We couldn't have the floodlights on, so the kick-off was 2 o'clock. And on the morning of the match, I'm sat in my office, and Lorna, who is here tonight, said, the referee wants to see you. So I said, oh, Taff Reynolds he was called, he's from Cardiff. And he came in holding his neck fully, and he said, I can't do the match. And he was a bit of a comedian, so I thought he was joking. You know, I said, push off, I've got a lot of work to do. So he said, honestly, he said, I was at my brother's last night at Newton Abbot and I slept funny. Oh, God. So, right, I rang the Football League. I said, I've got the referee here. He says he can't do the match. He's crooked his neck. So we said, let's speak to him. So he said he couldn't do it. So they said to me, right, you'll have to take him to a doctor and you'll have to doctor to examine him. And then come back to us. So, oh, God. Match day. Yes, so I take him down to Dr. Walker down at Everington Street, our club doctor. No, Graham, he can't do the match. Back to the ground, ring up the Football League. Right, we'll appoint another referee. We'll ring you back. 10 minutes later, they ring back. The referee's coming from Droitwich in Worcestershire. This is about 11:30. I said, the kick-off is 2 o'clock. He won't get here for 2 o'clock. I mean, there's a Mr. Crabb at Exeter. He was our Football League referee. I suppose they thought that was a bit too close, but they wouldn't let him do it. So they said, no, he'll get down all right. But if he should arrive late, you must go into the dressing room and see the 2 linesmen, and the senior linesman is a Mr. Reid of Bristol. You must tell him that he must take the match, and you'll have to find another linesman. Now, who have you got who's done like refereeing football combination matches down there? I suddenly thought of a pal of mine called Peter Potter. He was a radar fitter in the Gasport. I've got the Gasport on there. He was a radar fitter in the dockyard. So I ring him up, and I said, look, I want you to come to the match this afternoon. You're on the line. He said, yeah, pull the other bloody as you would expect. He said, I'd like to come up and watch it. He said, but I can't get time off. I said, well, you've got to get time off because I need you. You're the linesman this afternoon. I explained the whole position to him, and he agreed to come up. So he came up. No sign of the referee. So I go down. I said to this Mr. Reid, you've got to do the match, and this is Mr. Potter, and he's going to be the linesman. When the referee comes, the match, we will have to stop the match and that. So 20 minutes after the kick-off, along comes the referee with a police motorcyclist behind him. And who was the police motorcyclist? David Down. Ex-Argyle man, he was there. So he said to me, right, come down to the dressing room with me. And he changes and he says to me, you must come down on the pitch with me, and I'll explain what's going to happen. So I go down on the pitch with him, and he says to me, as soon as the ball goes into touch, you must nip down to the linesman there and tell him to wave his flag and stop the match, and I'll come running out. I said, all right. My directors were up in the director's box saying, what the hell's Graham doing on the touchline? So the ball goes into touch, and so a quick run down. So I run down. There's a policeman coming towards me. He thinks I'm a hooligan. So I grab the linesman. Cut a long story short, the match is stopped. Mr. Reid comes off. The proper referee goes on. Peter Potter comes with me. I said, don't have a shower. Just put your jacket on. Come up and sit with me. Sit with me in the director's box. And that's what happened. So that's one of the strange things that was in football. But at half time, I went in the boardroom, and all the directors were looking at me. What were you doing down on the touchline with the referee? And so I had to explain what it was all about. So that was that. We drew 1 each. They played wonderfully well. They had some top-class players playing for them. The Man City team, we drew 1 each and lost in the second leg. So that was that. On a more quieter thing, the next thing I can report was on the 17th of November 1981. The day before, the night before, there was a board meeting, and Robert Daniel, the chairman, said to me, Graham, we won't want you, and we're having a private meeting amongst the directors. When we're free, we'll give you a ring, and you come down. I said, okay. 2 hours later, nothing's happening, and all of a sudden I hear the cars going out, all the directors' cars going out. I thought, good God, what's happening? So I hurried down to the boardroom. Bill Harper was there. I said, what's happening? And Bill, he said, there's a lot of strong language now. He said, they're all gone. So straight away I tried to get Robert Daniel, the chairman, on the phone. I couldn't get him. I tried 3 or 4 times and I couldn't get him. The next morning I go to work. I'm up there quite bright and early as always, and the mail arrives. And there's one for the urgent attention of Graham Little, company secretary. That's important. I open it up. We, the undersigned directors, resign. Don't give any reason, of course. They all will sign, and they sign their names. 5 directors resign. So straight away, I ring the chairman. He said, "Come out to my house immediately." You know. So I go out with him. Spent the rest of the day with him at our accountants, ringing up people, trying to get new directors on the phone. So I won't go on with the rest of it because there was a lot of controversy after that. So that was that. In my time, I had 12 managers in 26 years, 12 managers, 5 chairmen, different chairmen, and 20 directors. I believe it or not, I got on well with all 12, and in most cases I was very sorry to see them go. I got on extremely well with Billy Bingham was one, Kelly, Malcolm Allison, of course. He was quite a character, as everybody knows, but he was a brilliant coach. And I remember distinctly, he said to me, he was appointed manager. The next morning he said, right, when the players come in, I'm going to have a full-scale match on the pitch. He said, and I'll tell them that the best 11 in that match will play on Saturday. Can you get a proper referee? He said, I want a real referee to do the match. Can you get a referee? I said, yeah, I've got a chap who always does these matches when managers request them. So I ring up David Downs. So David refereed the match, and I watched a bit of it, and they were kicking 7 bells out of each other. And the best 11 played on the Saturday, and we won, of course. But Malcolm was an absolute smashing bloke to get on with. He really was. Just give you one incident. The Vice President's Club ran a lottery. They were through Cliff Hartley. He was the chairman, and they were raising a hell of a lot of money for the club. And we asked Malcolm with the first week, Malcolm, will you do the draw for the numbers and so forth? So it was all arranged that he would come in here, which was the Vice President's Club, to do it. And he said to me, there's one important thing I want done before. I said, yes, what's that? You know, he said, there's a horse running, I want it back this afternoon. He said, £100 to win. And he said, how can I get it on? I said, leave it to me, I can do that. So he gives me £100 in notes. What's the name of the horse? And I got a good memory. I can't remember the second. It was Illustrious something. So I thought, so he gives me the money. So I got hold of George Robertson, the groundsman. I said, nip up the betting shop and put £100 on this horse, you see. And he said, £100. If he's putting £100, I'll put some money on it. Why don't you? So I think I'll have to put a £5 each way or something. I said, yeah, I'll do it as well. So as soon as the lottery was over, 2:30 the race was, in comes Malcolm into the tea room, turned the television on, we're watching it. And the horse came in 12-1. So we had £100 to win on this horse. That's one of the things. But he was a real character. He was on the downside. Quite often he would go to London, and he had a lot of contacts in London with Terry Venables and people like that, and they would go on drinking sessions and so on. One morning at home, the telephone went, and he said, "It's the Paddington police station here." I said, "Oh God. Who's this?" He said, "We've got your manager in the cells." I said, "Why? What's he done? What's he done?" They said, "Well, apparently 2 men brought him down to the station after they'd been drinking a lot, I suppose. Brought him down to the station, and they sat him down on a seat, and there was a lady sat alongside him, and he almost dozed off and leaned over and knocked the poor lady onto the floor. She screamed the place down, and poor old Malcolm got arrested. I mean, it wasn't malicious on his part, he was just drunk. So, the first thing you do then is ring the chairman of it. "You'll never guess what's happened to our manager." "Oh my God, what's happened?" I said, "He's assaulted a woman." Unintentionally assaulted a woman, and he's in the cells at Paddington police station. But having all that to say, he was idolised with his coaching, and he was a smashing fellow, Malcolm. He was one of the best coaches in the country at the time, and unfortunately, we lost him to Manchester City, and he became the manager, and then Bobby Saxton took over, of course. Which brings me to another thing. I've told the last time I told everybody about Mr. Maxwell, but I'll tell you again. Probably everybody's heard about Maxwell. He owned the Daily Mirror, and he was a big noise, and he died some years back. But he owned Oxford United, and there was an extraordinary general meeting called by the Football League about the contracts, the TV money that the clubs were getting, and all the divisions were all in. You sat down in, as Mr. Starnes will tell you, in alphabetical order. So I've got Portsmouth next to me, Plymouth, and opposite to me was Oxford United. Jim Hunt was the secretary of Oxford, and the Portsmouth fellow said to me, "Where's Jim today? He's a bit late coming. He's usually on time." Everybody's all waiting for the meeting to start. With the same, this big man came in. It turned out he was 20 stone. Maxwell, absolutely huge. And he came down and he made straight for our table, and he was sat opposite me. He came right towards me, and he held out his hand, and he said, "Maxwell, Oxford United." I said, "Little Plymouth Argyle." But he made the most wonderful speech I think I've heard in my life. He tore them to shreds, the management committee of the league. He said, "It's absolute peanuts what you're getting, and when you consider what they're getting now, billions now." But he tore them to shreds. It was an absolutely brilliant speech on his part. What shall I talk about now? Well, another famous name, George Best. George came down here, driven by, I think it was Miss World or Miss UK or something. He came down here on a Sunday to play in a charity match, and I was sat up in the director's box watching the game, and it was sponsored by Plymouth Sound Radio, and the chairman was Mr. Hussle. And he came over to me and he said, "Graham, would you do me a favour?" I said, "Yes, what's that?" He said, "There's an envelope here with some money in," he said. could you see George Best after the match and very discreetly hand it over to him? I said, what is it? He said, well, that's his paying for coming down for the match. So after the match, as soon as the players come out, well, they go in and change and everything. So I wait for George to come out, and I approached him and said who I was. And I said, I've got some money here for you. I said, but I've been told I've got to be discreet. So I said, can you come into the treatment room, which is now where the toilet is out here, but it was the treatment room then. So I took him in there and took the money out, and I started counting it out for him. Or no, he started counting it out, that's right. And he got halfway through, and he said, oh, I'm sure this will be all right. So I said to him, would he like to come in the boardroom? And he said, yeah. He said, I'm lucky to be here today. He said, I got Miss World. He said, she drove me here today. He said, and we got to Oakhampton, and he said, we didn't know where to get to Plymouth. So he was lucky that he got to the game. So I took him in, and the next time I saw him was when we played Manchester United in the FA Cup at Old Trafford. We only lost 1-0. Lou McCarry scored the goal, and it was a very, very good game. But I was going into towards the dressing room, and he came out. He was cursing and swearing because apparently all the week he'd failed to do any training, and he turned up on the Saturday expecting to play, and Tommy Docherty wouldn't play him. So he was in the dressing room, and you're not playing. So of course out he went. And talking about Manchester United, my most embarrassing moment, I should think, up to that time, makes me laugh when I think about it. When we played Manchester United, that match that we lost 1-0. After the match, we were all in the boardroom, and Robert Daniel said to me, Graham, have you phoned Stafford? That's Stafford Williams, the other director, because he's back in Plymouth. Have you phoned Stafford to tell him about the match? And I said, oh no, where can I get a phone? And Matt Busby, the top man, of course, of Manchester United, he was there, and he said, Graham, come in my office, you see. Oh, thank you very much. So I go in the office. So he said, what's the number you want to ring? So he dialed the number, and it wouldn't be considered to be posh now, but he had a phone there that he could hear everything that was Stafford was saying to me. And so I said, hello Stafford, it's Graham here from Manchester. I said, we lost 1-0. He said, yeah, I heard the bastards beat us. He said, I hate Manchester United. And there I'm stood there, Matt Busby, at that time, one of the most famous men in football. And he stood alongside me, and so I said, he said, and he always had this habit, whenever I rang Stafford, he said, well, go through the team then, what was the goalkeeper like, so and so, right back, left back. I'd go through all the ruddy team and tell him. It's so embarrassing, and Matt's there, stood alongside me, he's laughing, you know. When I said, look, somebody wants to use the phone, I'll have to go, and I made the excuse. And I said, I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Busby, like, or Matt, or whatever I called him. I'm terribly sorry about that, you know. So he said there's lots of directors like him. He said, don't worry. He didn't seem to bother him at all. But I was very, very embarrassed. But I mean, he was an absolutely lovely man. I thought as a director, he backed me in everything I did. I think Stafford was a wonderful director. But he was very naive as far as football is concerned, and I'll quickly give you another instance. We had a directors' meeting, board meeting, when Billy Bingham was the manager, and all the business is done, and you better get the manager in now, Graham. So I said, Billy, bring Billy in for the meeting. So he gives his report, as they do, managers, and he said, So Robert Downer said, "Has any director got anything to ask the manager?" So Stafford says, "Yes, I do." He said, "In my restaurant," he said, "there's a man who delivers the milk every day." He said, "He's a real mad Argyle supporter," he said, "and he says he thinks Mr. Bingham's got it wrong in one instance." And he said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, he thinks that Mike Greaves, the right back," he said, "he's attacking all the time and gets some beautiful centres over. He thinks he should play Mike Greaves at outside right instead of right back." So Billy sat alongside me, so he says, "Have you got his telephone number?" Mr. Williams, you've got his telephone number. And he said, "What do you want that for?" He said, "Well, before I pick the team next week," he said, "I'll bring him up and get his advice." But having said all that, he was a smashing chap. I'll quickly give you one more incident with him. This is the type of person. We played Chelsea in London. We played Chelsea in the afternoon, and we were too late to get the 6:30 train back. So it was all agreed we come back on the sleeper train at midnight. So the players can go in London, do what they want to do, and so on. So we're in the Great Western Hotel at Paddington, which is right on Paddington Station. We're in the lounge there, and I'm sat there with Mr. Williams and Mrs. Williams, and he says to her, "What do you want to do tonight, Mrs.?" So she said, "Can we go to a show?" So he said, "Yeah." He says, "Graham, see the porter over there, ask him to ring the London Palladium and get some tickets for the show." See, I said, "You won't get in on a Saturday night, Stafford." I said, "It's ridiculous." So he said, "Well, get him to try." So go down and tell the porter. He said, "You won't get anybody tickets on a Saturday night." I said, "Well, would you mind trying?" So he tries, and he said, "No, the only thing that's empty is the Royal Box." I said, "Oh, all right." So I go back to Stafford and I said, "No, I told you." I said, "No." He said, "Haven't they got anything at all?" I said, "Well, only the Royal Box." He said, "Well, did you book it?" I said, "What, the Royal Box?" He said, "Yes." He said, Go on. You have plenty of money, man." So I had to go back to the porter, and he says, "What, you want the Royal Box?" I said, "Yes." So we book it. So we cut a long story short, we get a taxi down, we go to the London Palladium. We're great, Graham. I'm glad I took that job. That's very good. sat in the Royal Box. Jimmy Tarbuck's the star. So Jimmy's there, and he says to the audience, "When the revolution comes, you people up in the gods, you'll be down there. And you rich people in the Royal Box, you'll be up there." I'm in the Royal Box. But that's the type he was. But he was a lovely man. He really was a lovely man. The other thing was we had lots of cup ties, and talking about Billy Bingham, he went on to be the Everton manager, and they came here and beat us in the cup. But we had I think it was 39,000 for that match, Everton. And on the Monday morning, some of you may not have heard of it, we had what they called Dad's Army. When I first went to Argyle, the apprentices used to clean the ground up after the match, which I thought was terrible. So I had a brainwave. I got some pensioners, if they would come and do it. So I finished up with, I think it was 6 or 8. Most of them worked in the dockyard, and they were most of them were tradesmen. I paid them £20 a week they worked from 9 till 12 every day of the week, so Monday to Friday inclusive, and they cleaned up the ground. The directors thought it was a wonderful idea, and it didn't cost very much, and the manager thought it was wonderful because he didn't have his apprentices cleaning up the ground. For this Everton match, on the Monday, I get 2 of the Dad's Army come to see me. Mr. Little, come down to the toilets. So I go down to the toilets, and in the cistern apparently in all the toilets throughout the ground, altogether we found 112 wallets. There was a pickpocket gang of pickpockets came to the match, and the police explained to me after what apparently they did. They work in pairs. One bumps into you, robs you, gets your wallet, passes on to the man behind. And when he gets so many wallets, and he goes in the toilet and puts them up in the cistern. It turned out that everything else was in the wallets bar the money. They just took the money. There was back then, I don't suppose there was many credit cards, but so all the money is, but altogether there was 112 wallets, which was a terrible thing. Another thing, getting back to managers, one day I was particularly busy and I had a telephone call from somebody who used to work with me in the gas board, and he was a real, what would you call a flannel merchant. If he said if I said a thing was 6, he would say it was 12. He was terrible. So he rang me and he said, "I'm at Ilminster now." I said, "Yes." And he said, "Aston Villa are watching two players here." He said, "There's 2 youth players here. They're really good. I want them to go to Plymouth Argyle." So he was giving me a spiel, and I thought I wasn't in a very good mood. So I said, "Yes, all right, thank you." I dropped the phone. I wrote the names down, and I thought, "Oh, he's rubbish. I'm taking the noise of him." So I threw them in the bin. 5 minutes later, Tony Waiters came in, sweat pouring off him. He'd been training. He came in to sit down to have a chat. And he said, "What sort of morning are you having?" I said, "Oh, I've just had a chat." I said, "He's a real flannel merchant. He's recommending a couple of players that Aston Villa are on." He said, "Well, we've got matches on Harper's Park on Sunday." He said, "We've got lots of trialists." He said, "Can you get hold of him again?" He said, "To bring them down on Sunday." So I said, "Yes, all right then." Yeah. So I rang him up and I said, "Can you bring these 2 lads down on Sunday?" "Yes, I'll come down. I'll bring them down from Ilminster." So Sunday afternoon, I'm home. It's the match, the big match, I think it was in those days. So I'm watching the match and the front door bell goes. So I go out. It's Keith Blunt, the assistant manager. He said, "Graham, I'm sorry to bother you Sunday afternoon." He said, "But we got a player up there." He said, "This afternoon, we took him off at half time." He said he scored 3 goals, 3 smashing goals. He said, "We want to get him signed right away. Can you come up?" I said, "Yes, all right." So I go up. This young lad's waiting for me, so I go in the office and get the forms out to him to sign. I said, "What's your name, son?" He said, "Trusson." I said, "Trusson?" It was one of the names of the 2 players that this fellow was on. It's one of the 2 players that he'd recommended to me. Cut a long story short, he got in the first team in next to no time, and eventually we sold him to Sheffield United for 75,000. Graham, let that be a lesson to you. Don't disregard anybody. That would have been a real clanger. He was 75,000 pounds. So. The other thing I was going to tell you about was Bobby Saxton. I probably mentioned that the last time I was here, but we had a board meeting on a Thursday, and we had no manager. We were been looking for a manager. Billy Bingham had got the sack. We were looking for a manager, and Frank Lord was the acting manager. Got through the meeting all right. The next morning I come in, Frank comes in and he says to me, he comes into me and he said, he was in a bit of a panic. He said, "I want you to ring the chairman, Mr. Crooks, and tell him unless we get a centre half by tomorrow afternoon, we're going to lose to Preston 5-0. They're top of the table. We're going to." I said, "Well, it was a board meeting last night. You never mentioned any of this." He said, "Oh, I've been thinking about it." He said, "Nelson," he said, "he's no good, the centre half." He said, He said, we're going to lose 5-0. You tell him that. You see, I said, well, why don't you tell him? He said, no, you tell him. So, right, I ring Mr. Crooks. He says to me, well, he never said anything, did he, at the board meeting? I said, no. So he said, well, do you think you could get a centre-half? I said, well, it's Friday now, Mr. Crooks. He said, well, see what you can do. So I get hold of our chief scout, my best pal, Ellis Stothard. I said, look, Ellis, I told him the story. I said, who's the best centre-half you've seen this season? He said, a chap called Bobby Saxton. He plays for Derby. He's the captain. He said he was easily the best centre-half I've seen all season, he said. And he said, well, I said, well, they will let him go, will they? He said, yes. He said they're signing to Roy McFarland from Tranmere. They reckon he'll play for England. He's absolutely brilliant. So he said, they'll let him go. So I thought, right. So I ring Derby. Brian Clough. I speak to Brian. You see, yeah, 30,000, he said. See, I said, look, Brian, look, we're a very poor club. We're really struggling financially. We can't afford 30,000, you see. So I said, look, our directors get on very well. This is true. I said, our directors get on very well with your directors. I'm sure they'll consider. He said, I don't get on well with my directors. They're a bloody showers. So I said, well, can you speak to your chairman, about it? He said, yeah, I'll come back to you, see. He said, well, how much can you afford, see? I said, well, I don't know. He said, well, come on, give me a figure. I said, well, no more than, 12,000 at the very most. You see, he said, no, he can't go for 12,000. He's been my captain. So, hey, I'll ring you back. I said, all right. So he rings back. He said, you're hard. You drive a hard bargain. You are. 12,000's all right. Cash down. I said, no, we can't afford cash down. So he said, why not? I said, well, I'll have to speak to my directors. They'll have to put some money in. He said, well, tell them to put some money in. I said, no, well, how can you pay? I said, well, 6,000 down and 6,000 in 12 months. He said, no, 6,000 for the end of the season. I said, yeah, okay. He said, right, okay. I'll speak to the player and get him to ring you. To cut a long story short, Bobby Saxton rang me. He said to me, oh, that's a long way away, Plymouth, he said. I said, it's beautiful down here. So I said, have you been down here anywhere at all? He said, yeah, we had a holiday in Torquay. I said, well, it's better than Torquay. I said, but it's quite nearby. It's only just up the road. Speak to your wife about it. He said, yes, I'll ring you back. So he spoke to his wife, and he must have persuaded her. He came back. He said, all right, yes, I'll sign. So I said to Ellis, come on, you can drive. He said, no. He said, I've torn the stomach muscle. I can't drive. I said, all right, you've got to come with me. So there was no motorways or anything then. So it was 4 o'clock we left, and we got to the Midland Hotel in Derby at 12 o'clock at night, and there they were waiting. Brian Clough, Peter Taylor is his assistant, and Saxton and his wife. So we finally finish up at about 2 o'clock in the morning, and there's the photo there. With I borrowed a typewriter from the hotel, and I'm typing out the transfer forms, and Ellis is doing the contract there, and that was taken 2 o'clock in the morning. I rang the chairman, Mr. Crooks, at 2 o'clock just in the morning to tell him, and what the end of this is. The next day it was snowing heavily. We got to the ground at 7 o'clock, got his boots and everything, and drove across to Preston. And my memory's good. It was the Bull and Royal Hotel at Preston. That's where the team were staying. And I got there, and the players were in their pre-match lunch. So I kept him outside, and I walked in the restaurant and went over to the table, and I said to good afternoon, Frank. So we said, good God, what are you doing here? I said, you wanted a centre half yesterday. I've got one outside for you. Good God. So I took him out and introduced him to him. We played Preston. We played really, really well. and we only lost 1-0. And Saxton hit the crossbar in the 5th minute of the game. But the big problem was he didn't play him at centre half. He played him in midfield, and the answer to that was Nelson was a very strong chap in the dressing room. He played and captained Ipswich in the First Division, and I don't think he had the guts to kick Nelson out of the team, so we kicked somebody else out and put Saxton in his midfield. So what happened, Saxton comes to me then after the match and said, I'm a centre half, why was I playing in midfield? You see, I said, well, I'm sorry, that's something we'll have to sort out, you know. And I got somebody, an Argyle supporter, who lived in Derby, and he'd gone to Preston for the game, so luckily he drove him from Preston. I didn't have to take him back to Derby. This Argyle supporter drove him back. But I explained it all to the next meeting, and they made Saxton the captain. And of course, in the end, I won't say his luck would have it, because Ellis was a good choice of players, but he became the captain for several years until Tony Whiter sold him rather cheaply to Exeter, became manager of Exeter. And when Malcolm Allison went to Manchester City, Robert Daniel said to me, who do you think should be who should we go for as manager? So I said, well, I would think Bobby Saxton. He said, I couldn't agree more. Let's get on the phone to the chairman of Exeter, and which we did. And we got permission, and he became the manager of Argyle. So how about that?
Graham, it's 8:30. We have a short intermission.
Mr. Moore is looking me. A lot more, really.